Well, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Jake. I'm one of the partners here at Fourlane, and I specifically work with Acumatica and implementations and support. Marjorie already has done a video on QuickBooks Online and the month-end close process. So today we're just going to be focusing on the differences between Acumatica and QuickBooks Online. Feel free to put your questions in the chat. Hopefully have a little bit of time at the end to address them. All right, so we'll start off with the agenda. So today's agenda, we'll review the posting closing entries, and I'm going to be going through this agenda in QuickBooks Online first, and then I'll be going through the same process, but showing the differences in Acumatica. And then we'll be going through reviewing the financial statements, so running your balance sheet and profit and loss, comparing them to your aging reports, your AR and AP aging. And if you have inventory, we'll compare it to the inventory valuation in Acumatica. And then in Marjorie's video, she reviews the leading indicators reports and work papers. We're not going to touch on those just for the sake of time today, but I am going to show you the difference in closing periods in QuickBooks Online versus Acumatica. And then number 4 is we'll touch on a little bit of automation. At Fourlane, we do implementations from QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop to Acumatica, but we also help with implementations going from Acumatica back to QuickBooks. And so we have experience going both directions. But one of the things that I've seen in my years of doing implementations is the amount of time that you can save in Acumatica by doing month-end close. So there's just a little bit more automation tools than what you'll see in QuickBooks Online. All right, so I'm going to drag this over. So right here, this is QuickBooks Online. I'm sure if you're used to QuickBooks Online, you're used to this journal transaction screen. And I did a little bit of the setup just to save us some time, but I just entered a closing entry. So sometimes for these closing entries, you'll get a heads up from your CPA on how much you need to depreciate if you're doing fixed assets. And so in Acumatica and in IES now, you have a fixed asset module. So that will generate these journal entries automatically. But if you are using QuickBooks Online, you can set this up to be a reoccurring entry, which is what I did here. So you can set up the reoccurring entry and do save template. You could also do the same thing for your prepaid expenses. And with prepaid expenses, you can do a start date and an end date because it's more fixed. And so let's see. And then, yeah, so those are like the reoccurring entries. And then once you create the reoccurring entry, so I entered, this one was just a accumulated depreciation, which is a credit because it's a contra asset. And then it's going to hit my depreciation expense as a debit. And then I scheduled it to create in 2 days. So once it's created, you can also review it. And if I close out of here and I go to this gear icon, I can see my reoccurring entries. Yeah, my recurring transactions are all right here. So you can see your recurring transactions in QuickBooks Online and then review that. So these are all scheduled. And so that's the recurring entries in QuickBooks Online. And then the other thing, so going through the list here, so that's just closing entries in QuickBooks Online. If we were to run a balance sheet, we want to make sure that the balance sheet is for the correct date period. So make sure you're paying attention to the dates at the top of the screen. And then you could go one by one to each account on the balance sheet to make sure that it's correct. So in this video, we're not going to go through how to do a bank reconciliation, but I'm sure everyone knows how to do that. But you'll want to make sure that this balance is reconciled to your bank account. And then on the work paper, so the work paper is going to be your bank statement matched with the reconciliation statement in QuickBooks Online or Acumatica, and you're going to want to make sure that these numbers tie out. What we do want to pay attention to our AR and AP, as well as, so AR is here, right here, 2.4 million, and then your accounts payable account And then in this sample file, there it doesn't look like, yeah, there's, okay, and your inventory right here. So in Acumatica, I'll show you how to run an inventory valuation report. But one of the main differences between QuickBooks Online and Acumatica is in Acumatica, you have subledgers. So the data can actually, I mean, it can not tie out in QuickBooks Online, but it's a little bit easier for it not to tie out in Acumatica. So you'll want to make sure that you're running those subledger reports. If I go to my reports here and I click on my AR report, so I would go down and look at an AR aging summary report, and I would want to make sure that that balance ties back to my balance sheet. And if it doesn't, you want to make sure that it looks that you're looking at the correct date amount. So that was that 2.4 million, and I could see that this is for 2.4 million. So you'll want to do that for your AR, your AP, and your inventory valuation. Next is the profit and loss. So if I click on reports and I go through profit and loss, we want to run a profit and loss report. And the thing here is we can run it from period to period. And what we want to do is look for trends. So you can run a compare here and look for trends between the periods. And when you're analyzing this, you're going to want to look to see where the big jumps are and if anything is missing. So you'll want to look at miscellaneous expense, depreciation expense, so on and so forth. So I'm not going to go through all the in-depth pieces for this, just for the sake of time. And then lastly, so you'll run all your reports, you'll go through your KPIs, your work papers, and then at the very end here, you'll click the gear icon and you'll set your closing date. So hang on one second. Account settings, advanced, and then right here, we'll do edit. And then right here where it says close the books, you'll turn this on and you'll set your closing date. So if I was closing the end, I would set it for the end of December. And then you'll want to do allow changes after viewing and warning and entering a password. And that just secures that no one can make changes past that date without the password. So it defaults, I believe, to this first one, but you'll want to make sure it's on this one. So I know we went through that pretty fast, but I wanted to have enough time to go through the comparison in Acumatica. So I'm going to bring up Acumatica. So this is what Acumatica looks like. And if you're not familiar with Acumatica, it's been around since the iPhone. So it's been around since 2008. It's completely browser-based. So it works with Microsoft Edge, Google Chrome, Firefox. You could also view it on your iPhone or your Android phone. And they also have apps for both Android and iPhone. So what's showing here is the controller dashboard. This is just right out of the box. This is what it looks like. And so you'll want to look at your KPIs or leading indicator reports before month-end close. So I have total AR here and total AP. I just helped a client the other day. They had a really high AR balance. So we went through the AR closing process because each module has a closing process as well. That's one of the differences between the two systems. But with the AR closing process, we ran dunning letters and customer statements in order for the customer to be able to collect their $1 million of that was sitting in AR. So we'll get into that, but I just wanted to show this is what the dashboard looks like. And if you had questions, you can drill down into the KPI tile, and then you can see the balances that makes up. With every version, Acumatica is getting better at machine learning and introducing AI features. So one of the things we have is GL anomalies. So if there's like duplicates or anything like that, and this is our demo instance, that's why you're not seeing anything. It's also probably a good thing that these are all set to zero, that there's nothing to look at here. But with your live instance and this turning on, this data will fill out between the GL anomalies. When we're talking about closing entries and kind of comparing the closing entry process between QuickBooks Online and Acumatica, one of the features that Acumatica has that QuickBooks Online doesn't have is allocations. So what this is showing is, if I drill into this one, allocate utility expense by headcount. And if I drill down into it, so if you think for a second what your closing entries for your period are, and do you allocate different expenses for each department at the end of the month? And if you do, then this feature would be very beneficial to you. So sometimes companies allocate by headcount, sometimes it's square footage, and all of that in Acumatica lives in the statistical ledger. So that stat ledger right here. And so you can enter in, we have clients, just pulling up the journal entry screen. So if you flip the ledger here, and I haven't activated it, but you could enter in stat ledger, would show up here, and you can enter in, so you would enter in, like, let's say headcount as the account, and then the debit or credit would make it go up or down, and that would determine your square footage or your headcount. And so back to this allocation, so it knows the head count or the square footage that's living in your statistical ledger. And then you're saying on the source account, collect all of the expenses in this account and then send it out to the destination accounts here. And then that creates your journal entry every month that's going to allocate to the correct department. And sometimes department isn't an account, but it's actually a sub account. And if you're using QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks, a lot of times the classes that are in QuickBooks, or if you're in IES, they have dimensions. Now those are going to be your sub account segments in Acumatica. So it's a little bit of just a vocabulary change, but classes and sub accounts and sub account segments are all kind of synonymous, or they can resemble each other. The other nice thing that I didn't point out that I should probably point out is in Acumatica, similar to IES, you don't have to log in and log out for multiple entities. In Acumatica, you can just flip between branches very easily, and the user security allows you to lock down only data from, like, branch A and branch B. You get to decide who has access to data in whichever branch. I showed at the very beginning a depreciation entry in QuickBooks Online. If you were using Acumatica, and IES has this feature too, you do have fixed assets. So this is a fixed asset machine. And once you set up the fixed asset in Acumatica, you get to choose your depreciation method, whether that's straight line or a different depreciation method. You can kind of customize that, but that's going to calculate your depreciation for each period. And then the transactions show the journal the journal entry that's associated with that. So let's do this. So in this demo instance, I have multiple companies, and it's a little bit, it's configured to be a little bit more advanced, where each company or branch has its own calendar, because you could do that in Acumatica, is have one instance, but have multiple companies and branches that are on different calendars. So this one, if I flip to, let's just flip to 2005. So each of the statuses, these are all the statuses that you have in Acumatica, so it's a little bit more robust. You have open periods, which means you could post any of the periods, and then you have close, lock, deactivate. You can reopen, and you could also unlock periods. And then notice that you have each sub modules as well. So you have to close AP first in Acumatica, or you don't have to do that in a specific order, but you have to close the sub modules before you close the general. The GL. So you have AP, AR, this is inventory. CA is the banking module or cash, so making sure your bank reconciliations are complete. And then FA is fixed assets. So right here, you can see already that's a big difference between the two systems. So I'm gonna run a balance sheet in Acumatica. This is what the balance sheet looks like. So you'll want to make sure that your bank accounts are reconciled. And then this is your AR balance, 8.3. I'm running it for 02/2022. That's how old this demo data goes back. And if I click on receivables, there's a couple AR reports in Acumatica, but the one that ties to the balance sheet is going to be this AR age period sensitive report. So I'm going to open that in a new tab. And this is why I preloaded. Acumatica does run faster than this. It's just because this is our demo instance and we don't use it every day. So if I do 02/2022, and oh, one more thing to point out. I know I'm flipping back between tabs here, but you do have groupings. So this is going to show I have multiple companies and branches in this demo instance, and so this is going to show the very top level of all the data that's in this instance. But if I flip here, the numbers are going to change because this is the detail that makes up the consolidated. So I could do that with my report grouping here. And I'm going to have to run the AR. So I said that because it matters what branch or company that you run it for. So if I do products and I run the report and I go to the end, 7.3, and let's see, products it's off. This is 8.3, so it's off. So the ledger, the balance sheet does not match my AR aging report, and the reason for that is because there were entries that were manually entered from the GL to hit AR, and that's why they're out of sync. So there is a discrepancy. It's probably easier if I just search it here. But there is a discrepancy report that Acumatica introduced a couple versions ago, and that's discrepancies by account. So if I were to run this generic inquiry, it's a type of report that's in Acumatica, the from period and the to period. And for the AR account, it'll show me where the discrepancies are. So that makes it easy if there is a difference. And the same thing goes for AP. There's a discrepancy report for AP, and you wouldn't run the AR age period sensitive report, you'd run the AP age period sensitive report, and the same kind of rules apply. And then if I go to inventory, so I'm going to go to the inventory module here and run an inventory valuation, and we'd want to make sure that our inventory balance ties to the balance sheet as well. So you want to pay attention to the branch. We'll choose products, and then if we are in the right period, there's also a historical inventory valuation report that you can run per period. So that I'm just gonna leave that. It's not gonna tie because I'm in the wrong period, but you would run the historical inventory valuation report for a prior period if you needed to. And then I'm just gonna do one of these as an example. So going back to this right here, AR is probably the most extensive close process, but if I click on receivables here and show all, I know this is a lot of menu items if you're not used to it, but we don't have to turn all these on. They're all just turned on because it's our demo instance, but we would make sure that the AR documents are released, which means it's going to hit our financials. And then you could go ahead, and this is all optional, but you could calculate overdue charges if you know, a customer has a really big balance, and then you could prepare statements, print the statements to send your customer. It also supports dunning letters. So dunning letters meaning you could send your customer language if they're like 120 days old to say to pay their balance, or they're going to get hit with a late fee. But you could also change the language for how many days are past due. And then at the very end here, and this is kind of the main difference, is you close the period per module, and you would look at the unreleased documents and then click process, and that's per company as well here too. And then what that does is it fills in our, I guess I closed out of it, but it fills in our subledger in Acumatica here. So you can see this is for 2012, but you can see it closes. So when you close it on this screen, it closes it with a checkbox for that period here. And so the same thing goes for inventory, fixed assets, banking, accounts payable. So we didn't have time to go through the entire month-end close process, but that's pretty much the gist of going through each submodule and then closing the GL. And then we'll run this for, let's see, I'm gonna have to do 2022. This is what a profit and loss rolling 12-month looks like. So it's showing the month over month, and we've created reports in Velixo, which is a third-party Excel add-on that shows the change between periods as well. So when you're looking at this, you can see what's missing or those big jumps. So if you had a question, let's just say about your salaries, your payroll, you could drill down into here, and it'll show you the breakdown. This, if you're coming from QuickBooks, again, this would be your class. You could drill down again. And then this would show the individual transactions. This account details would show the individual transactions that make up that balance. And then if I drill into the batch number, it's going to take me to the debits and credits on my GL. And if I drill down into the ref number, it's going to take me into, oh, maybe I don't have access to that. It's going to take me, yeah, this will take me into the payroll if I do view source document. So. All right, let's see. I'm gonna check for questions. Don't see any questions. All right, let's see if there's anything I missed here. I think that's really it. Yeah, once you, oh, I guess another thing to mention, I know I have a lot of tabs open, but if I go to finance and I go to general ledger preferences here, one of the key things about the close to mention in Acumatica that I feel like sometimes gets missed a lot is you have restrict access to close periods. So we look at this especially in the file review when we're looking at a client's Acumatica instance. And if this isn't turned on, I always recommend to turn this on, because without this checkbox turned on, that means anyone can post to a closed period. So you'll want to make sure that this is always checked. Then the other thing is, if I go to the users, the person that's actually doing the close, like the CFO or the controller, should really have, let me get rid of this user type. So there's a role that's out of the box that just comes with Acumatica, and that's the financial supervisor. And if you don't have access to the financial supervisor, well, one, you don't want to give this to everybody, but you only want to give it to someone that should be able to post to a closed period. So without this checkbox, if you were to go to the master financial calendar and you're trying to reopen a period, or let's say you're trying to post to a closed period, you're not going to be able to do that without that financial supervisor role. So I think that's really it. So thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see everyone next time. Thanks.